All right, good afternoon and welcome to part two of Advocacy with ACWW. And we're delighted to be here with you this afternoon. This is being recorded, and we will put this up on YouTube probably in the next week or so. So you can stay tuned. We'll let you know. It'll be in WI Connections, and we'll send the link to Marie as to where you can find it. So we will turn the meeting over to Marie.
Hi, Lynn, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on what part of the country you are in. I want to thank you for taking the time once again to join us for this part two of the ACWW Advocacy Workshop. I will begin by extending a very special thank you and appreciation to President Lynn McLean of the board, the president of the board of FWIC Canada, for hosting this platform for us and the opportunity to do this presentation on advocacy. As I mentioned in our previous presentation, resolutions and recommendations passed by our society members are a very important part of the ACWW organization and the work we do. We are very much aware that action on advocacy begins with you, the membership, raising your voice on issues that affect you, your family, and your community. Women working together, striving for needed change is the heartbeat of advocacy. It can and it needs to be happening at all levels, municipal, provincial, national, and international, to bring about systemic change. Our aim with this event is to assist you with this, to give you some tools for your advocacy toolbox. In the first session, Dr. Elizabeth Ann Kelly, ACWW's lead on advocacy, began by giving us 3 elements that shape your advocacy approach. So today I welcome Elizabeth back to continue the conversation. Immediately following this presentation, there will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions, so please feel comfortable and engage in this growth opportunity. So welcome, Elizabeth, and I turn things over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen so you can all see my slides. So you'll all see yourself in duplicate for a split second. There we go. Yeah. So today I'm going to talk about building your advocacy campaign. And I'm sorry if you randomly get flashes over my head. There's nothing I can do about the lighting in this room. It's a temporary rental. But yeah, so when I do this session, I usually actually start by reading a poem that is called The Low Road by Marge Piercy. Alone you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they will roll over you. 2 people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon, an army can meet an army. 2 people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. 3 people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With 4, you can play bridge and start an organization. With 6, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration, 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more. And the reason I like to start with this poem is very much that last stanza about how it starts. It starts when we care to act. And over time, that one person acting, we may not be able to do very much. We certainly can't save the world all on our lonesome. But that caring to act brings more people in. And so then we can start to build a coalition and we can start to build a campaign and we can make a difference in our communities and in the world. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how we build these advocacy campaigns to be as effective as possible. So step 1 is defining the issue. You have to identify your problem. And this sounds really simple. You're talking, oh, well, my problem is climate change. But is that actually the problem in your community? Or is what specific thing about climate change is affecting your community, is affecting you as a person? What is it about climate change that you want to mitigate? That's your issue. It's not climate change, the big thing. It's actually the winters have been very mild. We've had a really crap sap season. We aren't developing enough we aren't being able to produce enough maple syrup anymore. That is the problem with climate change. How do we mitigate that issue?
I don't know what this is.
If everyone could mute themselves, that would be very helpful. Then part of defining the issue is analyzing what is causing this problem in your community. Why is this issue happening? Be sure to use research like community surveys, focus groups, etc. The reason you want to do this is because you don't want to spend all of your energy reinventing the wheel. Probably someone has had this problem somewhere else, maybe not in your community specifically, but maybe another community that's linked to yours, or maybe it's on the other side of the world. As a librarian, I always have to say, go to your local library and ask the librarians for help. We love answering random questions like this. So don't try and come up with all of the research, all of the issues, all of the root causes yourself. See what other people have noticed, and maybe ask your neighbors, ask people at church, ask whoever you have around you, so that you can see how this is affecting other people, what they think is the cause, and bring that all together. And then finally, set your objectives. What do you want to achieve? And be very specific about this. And so what do you want to achieve? What changes do you want to see? And once you can be able to say that, what do you want to achieve? What changes do you want to see? You can move on to step 2. And step 2 is understanding your audience. So who are you trying to communicate with? Who is your primary audience? This is the people who are being directly impacted by your issue. So it could be farmers in your community. Or if you are interested in looking at rural healthcare, then maybe it is everyone in your community, or maybe you're specifically interested in rural women's healthcare, in which case it's the women in a rural community. I always say, don't say rural women in general, say, okay, the rural women in my local community, maybe the general surrounding communities. Don't try and go global right at first, just stay local. Who is your secondary audience? These are the people with power to make decisions. So if you're working in your local community, that's going to be your local councilors. It might be provincial government. It's probably not going to be national government quite yet, but it could be eventually. You want to figure out who in the local area has the power to make decisions, to make policy changes. They are your secondary audience. Then you need to look for both primary and secondary. What are their concerns, priorities, and values? What do they care about? What do they care more about than other things? And what are their general values? What are their morals? One of the things is priority is actually incredibly important. If you poll people in the UK, 90% of people will say that hunting should be banned. It is terrible, it should be banned. But if you ask them slightly differently and you say, will a hunting ban or not a hunting ban change who you are going to vote into government? Only 3% of people say yes. So it's, yes, they don't approve of hunting, but do they actually care that much? No, not really. So pay attention to priorities. What issues are more important than others to these people? And then how can you use these priorities, these concerns, these values to better bolster your argument for change? Quite often, this means looking at concerns and values and leveraging those to change priority, to make your issue a higher priority for your audience. And then finally, based on who your audience is, based on their values, their priorities, What methods will create the most effective change? In Canada, using local languages might be important, especially in rural areas. I know, so I am friends with a woman who works for Okimakanak, or no, that's not right. Okimakanak is the second word. I can't remember. Basically, she works for the Cree Nation. Well, no, Okimakanak, I can do these things. And one of the issues that a lot of elderly Cree women have in accessing healthcare is that a lot of healthcare is not offered in the Cree language. So there's often a language barrier that they can't then access the systems to which they need. So do you need to use local languages is an important aspect. Also, will they respond better to numbers or emotions? So a lot of times politicians will respond a bit better to numbers, but then your local community might respond better to emotion, to storytelling, to friend raising. I think that's something my dad always used to talk about a lot, was friend raising. You're not fundraising, you're friend raising, because fundraising is a one-time commitment. Friend raising is a lifetime commitment. You're looking to make a coalition. So getting that emotional bond, that social bond, is incredibly important quite often with communities, but it might be a little bit less important with politicians. Step 3 is, once you know your audience, mapping your stakeholders. So I will be sharing with Marie a couple of worksheets, and one of them is a stakeholders mapping worksheet. So you use this to determine the level of interest and influence different people have in your campaign. So you can see on here, you have the power of the stakeholder and the interest of the stakeholder on your X and Y axes. And the people who have low interest and very little power, you monitor what they're doing, you offer impact of some kind of contact, usually through like social media, something like that, something very easy to do, but you don't worry too much about them. The people who have very high interest and low power, you keep them informed. You try to anticipate their needs. These are often going to be your general community members. They're people you talk to in the street who might be interested, they might be impacted by the issue, but they are not decision makers. Then you have people who have low interest, but high power. That's going to be the vast majority of politicians. They don't really care about your issue. They have a million issues and a million lobbyists talking to them every single day. And while they are, of course, sympathetic to your plight, they got other issues. You keep them satisfied, you keep them completely informed, but you don't take up too much of their time. So maybe like a monthly memo, 1 page, saying, these are what we're doing, this is the continuing issue, this is the impact since we last spoke, by the way. They probably won't read it, but someone in their office will. Then you have the people who are high interest and high power. These are community leaders that are specifically impacted by these issues, or they have people close to them that are. There's going to be 1 or 2 specific politicians that are going to be like this, and they're going to be the leaders of your other organizations in your coalition. These you manage very thoroughly. You make sure that they are aware of every single issue. You ask them questions. You communicate back and forth. With them, this is less of an informational thing and more of a conversation. Once you have your stakeholders mapped out, it is time to set your goals. Now, if you have your general issue, like I would like all girls in my community to graduate high school. That is your issue. So girls' education is your issue. How do you then set goals? So your overarching thing is sending girls to school, making sure girls graduate high school. That's going to take more than 1 SMART goal. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Specific means you make your goal as specific and narrow as possible. So for sending girls, it's not going to be girls go to school. It's going to be, I want X percentage of girls to graduate high school. It is measurable. So X number of girls to graduate high school in these increments. So, 1% increase each year. It is attainable. Make sure that it's actually something that's feasible for you to do. So again, it's not all girls in Canada graduating high school. It's maybe all girls in London, Ontario graduating high school. Even that's probably not fully attainable, but it's better. You want it to be relevant. Your goal needs to align with your values and your long-term objectives, not just what you're doing right now, but like, what do you see yourself doing in 10 years? And it needs to be timely. So you need to set realistic but ambitious timelines for your goals. So I want a 1% year-on-year increase in girls graduating high school in London, Ontario, and I want this to eventually, within 10 years, be 100%. I'm assuming 90% of girls already graduate. I don't know. I didn't Google that in advance. Another good example, and this is why I include this graphic here. It's not I will get fit, it is I will run. So I will do a specific activity. And it's not more often, it is twice a week. So that is measurable. Did I run twice this week? That's when you know you've done it. Is it achievable? You're not going to run 20 miles twice a week, but you can run 2 miles twice a week, or even 5 miles twice a week if you're a consistent runner. Relevant. Why are you doing this? So I can finish a marathon and timely by the end of 2024, not one day. Hopefully this is all making sense to everybody. So there will also be a worksheet on how to set smart goals, set smart goals for everybody. Step 5 is planning your campaign activities. So once you have your SMART goals, you can create a detailed action plan. What specific steps will you take to achieve each of your SMART goals? And then you assign roles and responsibilities. So one of these things, I don't know if you know this, but if there's a medical emergency out in a crowded street, don't just shout 911, because everyone is going to assume that everyone else is doing that. Point at a specific person and shout call 911. And that person is far more likely to do it, and 911 is far more likely to be called. So when you're setting your SMART goals and you're creating a detailed action plan, make sure that everyone knows what everyone is supposed to be doing in that situation. Don't just say, yay, this is what we're doing. Make sure that each person has a thing. Also, this ensures that not one person has too much and will burn out and everything will fail and fall apart. This is really important. Protect everyone, make sure that no one falls apart. Leverage your resources. What resources do you have? Make a list, like make an actual list. So what financial resources do you have? What people do you have? What information do you have? And what time do you have? And then look at those and figure out how your actions map well against your resources, or do you maybe need to change your actions a bit to make everything work? Also, can you access support from other organizations? So if you are a local WI chapter, maybe you can get support from ACWW, maybe FWIC, or maybe you want to start involving other WI chapters either in your local area or further afield to see if they're also interested in joining your campaign. Then choose your tactics. What are you going to use? What means are you going to use to ensure that you are drumming up support for your campaign? Do you want to go old school with a petition, a clipboard in the street? Do you want to go social media? Do you want to host rallies? Also, how are you going to communicate? Are we using statistics? Are we doing storytelling? Are we doing some in the streets direct action, like it's the 60s again? Are we going to go and meet with decision makers? How are we going, what tactics, what strategies are we going to use? Step 6. Sorry, I have to keep on moving everybody's faces so that I can see my own slides. We're having fun. Step 6 is to engage and mobilize. So number 1, raise awareness. This is a lot of what we talked about in the first session with attention, coalition, and emotion. This is where step 6 really comes in. Raise awareness. Educate those around you about the issue you are trying to address and why you're trying to address it, what goals you have. Build your coalition, partnering with local and national organizations, groups, community leaders, friends, and don't forget that you can find friends where you least expect them. So be creative. You know, in our first session, I talked about National Union of Mine Workers led the 1985 London Pride Parade, which no one would ever expect. But it's because gays and lesbians in London supported the mine workers in Wales during a miners' strike. They ensured that their children were fed and they had heat when the government was actually trying to starve them out. So you can find friends in the weirdest places. So always be creative. Think about maybe not even who absolutely shares your goals, but who wouldn't object to them. Maybe they have the same enemy, because, you know, that's a famous saying. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that is how the National Union of Mine Workers and the gay rights movement came together, was their common enemy was the police. Not always the best option, but you know, that is how it came together. And then encourage participation. Create opportunities for people in the community to get involved and try to be as inclusive as possible. Try to have family-friendly events. One of the things that a lot of women's movements will do is have a craft activity in the corner that kids can engage in with someone specifically in charge of watching the kids, so that all of the moms can then go learn about the issue and get involved and fully participate, and no one has to be paying attention to what 50 kids are doing, because there's already somebody in charge of that. That's how to be inclusive. Support everyone, make sure that everyone can be involved, or at least as many people as possibly can be involved, and advertise that in advance so that people aren't automatically discounting themselves, saying, oh, well, I can't do that because I'd have to bring my kids, I can't get a sitter, or, oh, I can't do that because there's no way I'll be able to get into X venue, I'm in a wheelchair. Make sure that there's a ramp, make sure it's accessible. Things like that. Try to be inclusive and try to make sure people are aware of that inclusivity. Number 7 is advocate for change. So we've built our coalition, we know what we're doing, we are ready to go out, we have our tactics set. So we are now going to prepare our message. We are going to go start talking to people. So we need to be very clear, and we need to be sure to tailor our message to a specific audience. So if we're talking to politicians, we're going to talk a bit more numbers, some emotion. Don't forget, politicians are afraid of tears. It's our greatest weapon. But you're going to need to tailor it. Through your tears, talk about some math. If you're talking to community members, then probably a more storytelling approach. You know, I don't know if you know, but this is something that's affecting many neighbors. Or I don't know if you know, but I personally have been experiencing this and I could really use some help. Or I heard, especially if it's a very small community, talk to someone as, you know, I was talking to your sister the other day and we were chatting about, and I don't know, but maybe you'd be interested in it too. Things like that, friend raising, social networking, incredibly important. Meet with decision makers, especially once you have a petition, a big social media following, something like that. Present your evidence, present the stories that you've collected from talking to people. Go to public meetings, especially recorded public meetings that are going to go up on the internet later. And drum up community support to influence key stakeholders. Show up to that, I don't know, I grew up in a village of 900 people. Our village meetings was usually the committee, 15 students who were there because they had to be, because they were taking participation in government and as a graduation requirement for high school, and no one else. So if you showed up to the village meeting and you had 10 people with you and you all wanted to talk about a specific issue, you were probably going to get your way. Show up with people if you can, especially very hyper local issues. That's a good way to get attention because they are not expecting anyone to actually come. And then follow up, maintain communication. So just like your parents taught you to send thank you notes after Christmas and after birthdays, remember to say thank you for letting you speak. And you'd really love to have another meeting. And by the way, did you know this, that, and the other thing? Just maintaining that communication, being consistent, making it very clear that you're not going away. And very much you will be polite about it most of the time, but you're still not going away. You are going to sit there. I find knitting is very helpful sometimes in these situations, especially if someone doesn't want to give you a meeting, because you can sit there in their lobby and you can knit. And it's really hard for someone to convince security that you are a threat if you are sitting politely in a chair knitting. So they can't really throw you out, but they also can't, they kind of have to give you attention eventually, especially if you're just willing to sit there forever. So following up, ensuring consistent communication is important. And remember to do it according to your stakeholder map. So less communication for the people with very little power and very little interest, all of the communication for people with lots of power and lots of interest. Then the next step is moving everybody's faces again is the next step. There we go. The next step is step 8, monitoring progress. So track your activities. See what has been done. So you had that plan of actions at the beginning. You are now going to turn that into a checklist. And you're going to say, yes, this has been done. So-and-so did it. And this was the outcome. Was it successful? Was it less successful? Did we need follow-up? By keeping track of how and what tactics are working, you can then move forward, adjusting things as necessary. Evaluate your impact. Are we actually meeting our SMART goals? So is the measure, and this is where the M, measurable, comes in handy. Measuring our progress, are we actually moving forward? Or do we need to adjust our SMART goals? Have we learned something important that we weren't aware of before, resulting in the need to adjust the goal so that it actually is attainable, it is measurable, it is relevant, it is timely, or whatever of the letters you need to change? And never forget to celebrate milestones. We get down into these trenches and we're just moving forward. And that's where burnout lies. We get tired, we can't do this anymore. We feel like it's never going to end, we're just trudging along. Share your successes, celebrate your milestones, especially sharing successes with community. So that shows that you are making progress, and that's a great way to sustain momentum. If people are in your community are going, well, it's not making any difference, they're going to disengage, they're going to stop caring, they're going to stop supporting you. So showing that you are making progress helps keep them engaged, helps keep them wanting to come back, and it helps keep caring, and it helps avoid burnout for the community as well. But yes, always celebrate. The littlest things are worth a bar of chocolate, because advocacy is a long haul thing. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. Step 9 is sustaining the movement. So as you are wrapping up your advocacy campaign, document your lessons learned, which honestly you should have been doing all along. This is why we are tracking our progress, but actually write it up. Document what worked well, what did not, and then you can bring that forward into your next campaign. You've learned a lot about your local community or your national community, your stakeholders, what worked, what didn't with these specific people, this specific audience. Plan for your longevity. How can the community continue to advocate for change after this campaign is over? Does that mean another campaign? Or are we just done? Are we solved world hunger? I mean, that would be a miracle, but please try it. I'd love to see that happen. Has this campaign uncovered new issues? As you were talking, as you were learning about rural women's health, did you learn that there was actually a specific community within rural women that are even more disadvantaged, that need specific help, needs specific care, needs specific interventions? Do we have new goals? So we have achieved our goals, hopefully. Are we now going to move on to another set of goals on the same issue, or are we going to move on to another issue? And stay connected. I'm always going to be talking about this. Maintain your relationships with communities, with stakeholders, with supporters. Once you have that audience, never let it go. Even if you are going to change your issue a bit, the audience will remember you as a person. They will want to help maintain that social connection, because humans are social creatures. And so we tend to put these connections before a lot of things. So if you pivot completely and you completely change sides of the political spectrum, that might be a bit of a harder sell. But if you are moving from, say, children's education to children's hunger, probably your audience is willing to move with you. So stay connected, maintain these relationships. That's incredibly important. And the final step is throw a party. Once your campaign is done, throw a party. Even if you did not fully or even partially achieve your goals, it is still worth celebrating the work you and everyone around you put in. And I really encourage you to invite everyone you can, including community members and stakeholders, and thank them for their help. Because this is how you get them to come back. Even if you were completely unsuccessful this time, you showed your gratitude to these people. So next time when you try again, they're likely to still be willing to work with you. And I'd like to, just as a final thing, talk briefly about why I'm always saying narrow specific goals, and by telling a story. So in 1800, Madeline Sophie Barat founded the Society of the Sacred Heart, which is a Roman Catholic network of girls' schools. They now operate in 42 countries, but she founded this in France. And it was on the premise that all girls, regardless of their ability to pay, had the right to an education that was equal to that of boys. She started these schools. For every girl who was paying full tuition, there was a girl attending for nothing. And they were in the same classrooms. And she noticed over time that the girls who were on scholarship did far less well in their morning classes than the wealthier girls, but in the afternoon they did just as well. And she looked into this and she realized, and this is why you research your issue, what's causing the problem. She realized that the problem was a lot of the scholarship girls, their parents couldn't afford to feed them breakfast in the morning, so they were coming to school hungry. The reason they weren't doing as well in their morning classes as their afternoon classes is they were receiving a free lunch. So then they were no longer hungry, they could pay attention in class. So she instituted a thing that still exists in every Sacred Heart school around the world called goûter, which is around 9:45 every morning. Every school, every class breaks for 15 to 20 minutes and everybody gets a snack. Originally, it was actually a piece of cake. It was originally yellow cake with pink frosting, which is fun for me. And what I really love about this is the poorer girls then started doing equally well as the rich girls. And it means that while you can't change the world with a piece of cake, you can change one girl's world with a piece of cake. And eventually that one girl, and then the next girl, and the next girl, and now they're educating girls in 42 countries. Yes, they have a school on 91st Street in Midtown Manhattan where the Kennedys go, but they also have a school in the world's worst slum just outside of Nairobi. And they're teaching the same number of girls in both places. A piece of cake can change the world if you try hard enough. So that's the end of my talk. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen to answer any questions anyone has. I know that was a whirlwind tour.
I have a question.
Mhm.
My question would be, the women that I'm associated with are not terribly likely to want to do a demonstration. What would be the next most popular and effective type of advocacy approach that you might think of?
I would actually say in this political climate, demonstrations are one of the least useful methods of advocacy because sadly people just ignore us in the streets. Though that said, the farmers with their tractors in Ottawa do get some attention.
Yes, yes.
Um, I would honestly say social media campaigns just
Okay.
are really important because it's a way of having very little input on your end. I mean, certainly creating high quality things are important, but I don't know if you have Instagram, but Instagram Reels, once they exist, they just kind of float around in the ether forever and they will pop up on random people's pages. Because how the algorithm works is it's going to show it to the algorithm. I'm going to say thinks. It doesn't really think, but mathematically it thinks. It thinks about what issues you're talking about, what keywords are in your reel, and then it says, oh, well, these people seem to think that that's important, so we're going to show it to them. But actually, who knows, maybe I'm wrong. So it's going to be 90% of those people that it thinks are sure to be caring about it, but it's going to show it to a random 10% of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so those 10%, if they actually sit and watch the reel, it's counting how many seconds people are watching. Those 10%, then it's going to start showing it to more people like them as well, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why in the first session, when I talked about getting attention is incredibly important, you have 4 seconds in which people are going to decide whether or not to continue watching.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can convince enough people to watch those first 4 or 8 seconds,
Yes.
it's going to start going more and more and more. And that's how you go viral. That's how you get 1 million views.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But always have descriptions. So yeah, have a video, have a whatever, have a tweet, have a link to a website that actually goes in depth. Most people are not going to click on it, but some people will. And that's where you get your really big supporters.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep.
Elizabeth Ann, I have a comment.
Absolutely.
Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed that. I also really liked the part where you were talking about the importance of developing community partnerships. I did a lot of that work when I was working. And saying thank you goes a long way because you want all of these community partners that you work with, whatever level of government it may be, or in the municipality or what have you, to remember you. And that is really important, so that when you cross paths again under any other scenario, they know your name, they know who you are, they know who you're with, and it works very well. So that whole saying thank you piece is important. Yeah, that's all
I
for me.
will also say anyone who's done charity work, sending thank you notes to your donors. People aren't used to it, but they do remember it.
Absolutely. Thanks again for a great presentation.
Thanks.
Oh, one other thing. Could you tell me the name of the poem that you read at the very start? That was excellent.
Thank you. I have to give all credit to my mother. I was raised with the poem. It's her favorite one. It's called The Low Road by Marge Piercy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments, random thoughts?
Hi, this is Nancy
Yes.
here. Again, excellent presentation. Wow.
you.
So much information. I think some of us are kind of stunned and overwhelmed as to how precisely you presented everything. And my follow-up question is, will your slides, say, be available somewhere to
Absolutely.
refer
So
to
this
too?
is
Because that would
being
be,
recorded and it will
okay.
be on YouTube, but I am perfectly happy to share these slides. They've been shared. This is not the first time I've done this presentation, I have to admit. I used to be the education policy coordinator for Girls of the Society of the Sacred Heart. So I used to do this a lot for high school students.
Mm,
We'll
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sure, thank you, Nancy, we will make sure that the worksheets are available and in the next Canadarian newsletter. Liz and I will work out the best way for you to be able to get those slides. Maybe it'll be through resources for the coordinators or to the society presidents, but we'll make sure that they are available. But we also want to ensure that FWIC, they will put in, and I know Lynn will, information, and we'll make those available to FWIC as well, so that everybody has access to this fantastic informative presentation.
Mhm.
And I just, I don't want to cut anybody off, but I just want to mention that the power of something simple, like you mentioned, Elizabeth, a piece of cake, can draw people in, and it can change lives in a way that we can't even imagine. And I loved your examples all along the way. They were very heartwarming but practical, and I think that is an approach that in advocacy we don't often think about. We
Mhm.
think of advocacy as, well, we got to get out in the streets with our picket lines and protest, but it's not all about that. And as you said, those are the most ineffective ways to have your voice risen, and it's working one person connecting to another on issues that are really pulling at the heartstrings, and you know there needs to be change. And I think that's the heartbeat of advocacy. It's that desire that you've seen something, and that something is causing you to feel uncomfortable. And maybe you won't change the world, but it's made you feel uncomfortable enough that you need to articulate it in words. Because if you just let it steam on a personal level, it doesn't succeed in doing anything other than causing your blood pressure to go up.
As an American, my blood pressure is already quite high at the moment. I will add, just very quickly, there is a difference between direct action and protests.
Mhm.
So having a demonstration, having a protest, it is quite often, sadly, very ineffective. Direct action can be more effective. However, it is also the riskiest option. You know, when we think of protests, actually quite often we're picturing direct action. So the Salt March in India, crossing the bridge in Birmingham, all of those are actually direct actions. They were specifically breaking the law, and they were specifically making themselves the victim to gain the moral high ground. But so many people got hurt doing that. That is why they worked. So I always hesitate. I always want to make sure that people are aware of the difference between direct action and protest. And they absolutely both have their place in advocacy, but they're just very risky. And sadly, protest, which is the safer of the two, is quite often ineffective. Yes.
You just brought back a memory. I don't know if anybody remembers, but like in the mid 60s in Ottawa, the homemakers went on strike because of the rising costs of food. Maybe women today could maybe take note. But my mother, the shyest woman, very self-conscious about her English, participated. These women stood in front of grocery stores and refused to shop in grocery store chains. And I was like, what is my mother doing? And my gymnastics coach was my mentor, said, more power to her. She strongly believes in something. So
yeah,
if you can draw out the shyest person to participate, that's great. I can't even remember if prices went down, but
They did.
I,
They absolutely did. So this was part of, there were a number of campaigns throughout the 60s and 70s. And in most cases, they were very successful. One of the most famous, actually, is in Iceland. It was called the Women's Strike. And it's now celebrated every year as Sausage Day. Because basically every woman, every mother in Iceland didn't work for 24 hours. They weren't mothers, they weren't teachers, they weren't anything. They all went to parks and drank wine and ate pastries. And the problem was every school had to shut because the teachers weren't at work, but also the moms weren't at home. So none of the fathers could go to work either. The entire country shut down. And the reason it's called Sausage Day is because they sold out of sausages, because that was the only thing the fathers knew how to cook for their children for dinner. And it was incredibly useful. And Iceland now is one of the most equitable in terms of gender societies in the world. And it's largely traced back to this one day. And I do think if every WI member talked to every woman she knew and everyone bought in, Canada could have a similar thing today.
Are there any other questions or comments? I see lots in the chat there, Lynn, where people are really appreciating so much this presentation, and it's been a powerful time.
Exactly. No, wow, what a great presentation.
This has been delightful. I love being able to talk to people about this.
Well, I want to thank you, Elizabeth. The time this time around was a little more acceptable for you.
Yes.
But thank you so much for this wonderful, helpful and insightful information. And it's a pleasure that we can all work together, and that we have this opportunity to learn together as well. As Elizabeth mentioned, she will share the worksheets, and I will make sure that I spread that information on where you can get those worksheets and where the PowerPoint presentation is available. As we mentioned already, this is all going, it's been recorded. Lynn will make sure it's on the social media of FWIC. So there'll be lots of opportunities for you to share this with your branch members, with your society members. And again, we want to thank you, Elizabeth, for making advocacy more practical, but not diminishing the value and the importance of us using our voice on issues that are affecting us as women, and as that are affecting our families and communities and the girls around us. So we want to continue on with the role we play at different levels. I want to thank you all, and especially thank you, Lynn, for again hosting us this afternoon, and for all the behind the scenes things that you have been doing for the national president of FWIC. And it's been an absolute delight and honor to be able to collaborate on this initiative. And I know as your new project, the sustainable clothing portion of that, I'm excited to see, because I think the 6 steps that you placed out in your initial presentation regarding that will be an opportunity for us as women to think twice about our purchasing power, and how even in those things that we have opportunity to raise awareness that these issues are important to us. Sustainable style through mindful consumption is the project. And I think that'll be a wonderful way for us to engage as women nationally, locally, and globally. I want to thank everybody for this afternoon, and I'll turn things back over to you, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Marie. It's certainly been our pleasure to host all of you this afternoon.